So good morning. I'm Steve Cleary, Executive Director of Alaska Trails. I'm very happy to welcome you to now our third Land Manager Forum. And I want to thank the Bureau of Land Management. The BLM, particularly Corey Larson, had the initial ideas for this Land Manager Forum to kind of wrap up the season, share some good ideas, and be kind of a debrief for the end of the summer. And then in April, we have our Trails Conference, which we hope you all will join us at. And that kind of kicks off the season. I put our job announcement in the chat, so please pass that on to anybody you think might be interested. Please keep yourself on mute until you need to ask a question, but please make use of the chat function to do that. Again, the recordings and the presentations will be on our website after the fact. And as one of our presenters and my newest board member, Shirley, just put in the chat, I in Anchorage and they are coming to you from Denina land. So we want to acknowledge the ancestors who have been part of preserving and taking care of this land for thousands of years. And I'm happy to kick us off with a presentation from Ellie Place of the American Hiking Society. Ellie joined AHS in 2021 with over 10 years of combined experience coordinating international volunteer programs, leading volunteer vacations, and serving as a volunteer for environmental or conservation organizations herself. And then with the Hiking Society, Ellie manages the organization's volunteer programs, including 40 to 50 annual volunteer vacations, which she and Shirley and Sarah are here to present on this morning, where people do week-long volunteer trips, service trips. And she also does 10 to 15 alternative break trips for college and university students to give back to the nation's trails on their spring breaks. Ellie's career has been dedicated to connecting diverse communities to the outdoors in a way that fosters a deep respect and active stewardship of natural environments. She holds a dual undergraduate degree from Brown University in geological sciences and Hispanic studies, and a Master of Tourism Management from Colorado State University with a focus on strategic management of natural resources, public land use policy, and outdoor recreation practices. And we're very fortunate to have her here this morning. So please take it away, Ellie.
Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for that lovely introduction, Steve. I'm just going to go ahead and dive right in to our presentation. All right, so American Hiking Society is an organization that empowers all to enjoy, share, and preserve the hiking experience. As an organization, we work towards this mission by empowering all communities to advocate for the protection and expansion of hiking spaces, foster trail stewardship, and collaborate with partners whose strengths are complementary to AHS. So how that looks kind of on the day-to-day, AHS is a nonprofit organization with 8 full-time staff. And I was saying a little bit earlier, but we have a fully remote staff that are based across the country. Our headquarters is in DC. However, I live and I'm calling in from just outside the Seattle area. 80% of AHS's revenue comes from contributed resources. So we rely heavily on our partners, including corporations, foundations, government, and individual giving, so that we can keep the cost of our programs low for our volunteers and kind of break down any barriers that prevent anyone from joining our programs. So American Hiking Society has a couple main programs, one of them being our volunteer programs, which I will talk about primarily today. So American Hiking Society runs and organizes between 35 and 50 volunteer vacations annually, 10 to 15 alternative breaks. And we also do a National Trails Day, which is a single day event where partners from across the country will host just a single day trail service day and celebration. And in non-COVID times, we get up to 1,000 participants or different locations participating in National Trails Day. However, of course, as with many things, we've kind of had to pivot and adjust that program with COVID. One of our other big factors of the organization is our advocacy. So since the founding in 1976, American Hiking Society has worked with Congress, federal agencies, and recreation and conservation partners on policy issues and legislation to ensure funding for trails, the preservation of natural areas, and the protection of the hiking experience. We also offer ambassador programs for young leaders in the hiking and outdoor and conservation space. So that's our Next Gen Trail Leader program. All right, so I'm just gonna start talking about volunteer vacations, which are week-long trail building and maintenance projects, which are organized by American Hiking Society, but hosted by our partners, which include the Bureau of Land Management, the National Park Service, the Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as state parks, trail organizations, and other nonprofit partners across the country. So these projects are week-long or sometimes shorter in length, and they typically consist of between 6 and 10 crew members, and they all involve trail maintenance or building tasks on hiking trails on public lands. So AHS has been hosting volunteer vacations since the founding of the organization in 1976. And then through this program, volunteers have contributed over 650,000 hours of service that have helped to build and maintain almost 5,000 miles of trails and top 11.5 million in volunteer labor. And I know that as many land managers and organizations here can attest to, volunteer effort is a crucial part of maintaining trails and these public spaces with super high visitation, especially in the last year as more people go outside and participate in outdoor activities. So just increased demands on the land and of course, budget cuts and other restrictions in these areas that make it harder for the staff to kind of maintain these trails and complete these projects. So volunteers are a huge, huge part of making sure that the access to these trails is continuous and always improving. All right, so how do volunteer vacations work? So in the summer and the fall, hosts will submit project proposals for review to American Hiking Society. And then we work hard to select 35 to 50 projects that get added to our annual volunteer vacation schedule. And then American Hiking Society posts our schedule online and recruits volunteers for each project through our national database of volunteers, partners, and sponsors. So the program is designed to send each host a group of eager and hardworking volunteers that complete trail maintenance and building project needs. And there is no cost for to host a volunteer crew. So we try and make it as easy as possible for hosts to request and get a crew sent to them. However, there are several things that we ask the hosts to provide, and I'll go into that a little bit more detail here. So we ask that the hosts essentially create the project plan and sometimes a backup plan. As many of you know, weather and different factors can always influence the day-to-day out on the trail. The hosts are also asked to provide the technical expertise and supervision of volunteers, because while many of volunteers do come with lots of trail service, they are volunteers and a lot of them will join for sometimes the first time or are new to trail service in general. So the hosts are generally in charge of providing all the project oversight and safety supervision throughout the week. The hosts are also asked to provide lodging for volunteers, and that can look different depending on what the host is able to provide. Sometimes it's a cabin or a lodge. Sometimes our volunteers will stay in staff housing, but more often than not, our volunteers are happy to stay in campsites, either whether that's an improved campsite or car camping, or we even do host backcountry camping trips for projects that are a little bit more remote or that might take a day or two to walk into. The hosts are also asked to provide tools and safety equipment, and wherever possible, the group cooking supplies, which may or may not include, the stove, pots, pans, utensils, food, storage, and fuel. The hosts are also, if able to, asked to provide transportation to the worksite if hiking is not an option. So for instance, if volunteers are camping at a campsite, but the project worksite is a mile or two drive away, most of the time volunteers will drive to the project site. However, some locations, especially up in Alaska, that's not always the case because we have more volunteers that choose to fly into those locations. And so we try and offer airport pickup and drop off, and we'll coordinate with the hosts to arrange that, as we did last year with our trip up in Alaska. All right, and on the flip side, American Hiking Society provides promotion of the trip nationally through our website, printed trip schedule, and industry events throughout our through our sponsors and partners throughout the year. We provide the logistical support and communication throughout the trip planning process, and a volunteer food stipend for trips that cannot provide their own food for volunteers. And I think one of the most important things that American Hiking Society provides, which Shirley can attest to, is the assistance from a volunteer crew leader who aids in the menu planning, food shopping, meal preparation, and camp or lodging logistics. So these crew leaders are really crucial aspects of the program. So we essentially send someone who is kind of handles the social leadership and camp logistics for the volunteers throughout the week. So the hosts really can focus on the trail maintenance and trail building. And then, of course, the other very important aspect is the volunteers. So volunteers provide volunteer labor and generally very eager and enthusiastic attitudes. They also provide their own camping gear, including a backpack, sleeping bag, tent, personal items, linens, eating utensils, and essentially whatever gear the host is not able to provide, we ask our volunteers to provide that gear on their own. The volunteers also provide their own travel to and from the pickup point, which is generally the closest major airport, depending on the project site and location. All right, so one of American Hiking Society's big goals and our mission is to empower all to enjoy, share, and preserve the hiking experience. So to ensure that we're truly moving toward our vision where everyone feels a sense of belonging in the hiking community, AHS believes it's our responsibility to understand and address historic and current barriers, disadvantages, and mistreatment experienced by people as they hike, consider hiking, or access the outdoors. It is our responsibility to serve as a catalyst for positive change in service of a more just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive hiking community. So this goal is weaved throughout our program and in our day-to-day operations, and it's something that we ask our hosts share in as well. So that was kind of a brief overview of volunteer vacations. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Shirley, Sarah, or Claire, and they can kind of talk about their experience on the volunteer vacation that we hosted up in Alaska this last year. The presentation that I have and that Steve has that we'll post on the website has more details. I have about 10 more slides, I think, that kind of go into more detail about the specifics of hosting. So if there's any questions, we can kind of dig into that after Shirley and Sarah and Claire have a chance to share about their experience. And that's also posted online so that anyone who's interested can kind of look more into those details and go from there.
That's great, Ellie. Thanks very much. I'm going to have you stop sharing your screen then and have Sarah put her great photos up that she's going to share with you all. My one question while we switch that over, Ellie, do the applications usually come from entities like the Forest Service or from nonprofits like Alaska Trails, or maybe both?
Yeah, from both. Recently, we've gotten more applications from our federal partners, so the Forest Service, the National Park Service, and Bureau of Land Management. So basically, anyone from within those agencies, any land manager can submit an application. We are happy to host with any trail organization as well, which we find really supplements their own volunteer programs well. However, most of the time, our national partners are the ones who are looking for the volunteer work or, partnering with us kind of overall, if that makes sense.
It does. That does. And my final one for now is, when was the deadline for submitting applications for next summer? I fear we're a little bit late with our timing for you all.
We are. So the deadline is typically the beginning of November, but if anyone from this presentation is really excited about potentially hosting a volunteer vacation next year, I'm more than happy to work with that individual and talk to them about the options. We're currently reviewing applications, so it's not too late to get on the schedule. So I'm happy to kind of work with anyone on a case-by-case basis.
Great. Well, thanks very much. And feel free to share any links in the chat that you think might be valuable. And I know it's in your presentation as well. And so this past summer, the U.S. Forest Service, Claire Shipton, applied to host a volunteer vacation in which our next two presenters participated. And so I'm going to introduce both of them and turn it over to Sarah and Shirley, but I know that Sarah has some slides to show. And so Sarah works seasonally with the U.S. Forest Service, but she's also the Anchorage Outdoor School Program Manager, where she works to connect young Alaskans to their public lands through residential place-based education programs. She's drawn toward education in non-traditional settings, and she has worked at the Glacier Institute, Montana Outdoor Science School, Teton Science School, and the Traveling School, teaching and traveling with students in South America on an experiential overseas semester. She now lives and works for the Kenai Mountains Turnagain Arm National Heritage Area, and she lives in Moose Pass, also working seasonally as a backcountry ranger and wildland firefighter for the Forest Service. She holds a BS in molecular and cellular biology from the University of Puget Sound and loves to be in the mountains, learning, recreating, foraging for her favorite wild foods. So Sarah's role this past summer was with the Forest Service, and she worked with the volunteer vacations crew the whole time. And the crew leader was Shirley Banks. Shirley is the newest board member at Alaska Trails, which I'm very happy to let you all know. Shirley was born in Palmer and raised on a homestead in Chugach. After living in Georgia for several decades, they returned to Alaska to work as a chaplain. Shirley had a career in health education and promotion in a university setting before going to seminary. Their skills include program planning, implementation and evaluation, training and group facilitation. Shirley spent all the time she could in the woods as a child in Alaska. Later, summer camp counselors in Georgia and North Carolina taught Shirley skills in hiking, backpacking, paddling, campcraft, and outdoor ethics. In 2006, Shirley started volunteering with the American Hiking Society, which gave them the opportunity to lead trail crews all over the United States, including Alaska. Since then, Shirley has led over 20 trail maintenance volunteer vacations for AHS, each a week long. Shirley loves being outside every day in the woods, bogs, and mountains with the cattle dog mix named Palmer. So take it away, Sarah and Shirley. Sarah, are you able to share those slides, or would you like me to get those?
Shirley is actually going to kick off our section, so I will
talk
my slides. No problem.
Wonderful.
When they're done.
Shirley, take it away.
I will go ahead. I am having my internet connection, so if I have to bounce back in. Of the land manager, if you're affiliated with any kind of group that is responsible for maintaining or building trails, if you have any interest in hosting a volunteer vacation, I would enthusiastically say do it. I seriously doubt you're going to regret it. I was talking to Sarah this morning, and I'll let her speak for herself, but she was saying that she had a good time. So I feel like the volunteer vacations are good for volunteers, but they're also really good for trails and good for staff. They bring people from all over the country, and I think especially in a place like Alaska, it's the trip of a lifetime. So I would not be surprised if people tacked on a week before or after their volunteer vacation trip, or maybe if the schedule's coordinated, if people did back-to-back volunteer vacations, that wouldn't surprise me. Even though the deadline is passed, Ellie and I are happy to serve as resources for you as you get your application together. The volunteers, in my experience, volunteers typically come from many, many walks of life. Probably about maybe half, 2/3 of the volunteers are retirees, and others are people who maybe are earlier in life where they don't have a lot of home responsibilities, or they can get away for a week. So you get a great mix of people. Typically we assemble on Sunday, meaning people fly in that day, or there'll be a meetup point like at the airport or some other convenient location. And then we'll get out to the work site, get oriented. set up camp, talk about camp life, and kind of get to know each other a little bit. I like to recommend that we work on Monday and Tuesday and take Wednesday off, or either a full day or a half day. People need to rest, they need to play, they need to hit their reset button. I find that a lot of times people work harder than they really should on the first 2 days because they're kind of trying to prove themselves, or they're just so excited. So, you know, reminding people to pull back and save a little bit for later. And people kind of get their feet under them the first couple days. So if we can have a day to rest and play and enjoy the area, that's great. That's not always possible. So we always work with what the host organization's needs are. For example, a trip we did in Olympic National Park, you know, we were backpacked in with llamas, which is really cool. So it's not like we could just, you know, leave for a day. So we took a rest day towards the end of I think we did a half of a rest day at the end of the week instead. So it is volunteering, and people do come to work. They're very eager to work and work hard. But it's also vacation, and people are there to have a good time. The host organizations a lot of times have reflected that they're really impressed with how much the crew gets done. You know, it's not scout crews and other crews of get a lot of work done as well, but this has a little bit different feel to it because these are people who are a little further into adulthood and are just at a different place developmentally. So they're there because they're really driven to volunteer. They love being outside. I would say out of a crew of maybe 5, 6, 7 people, you might have maybe 2 who are new to camping, new to being outside, and everybody else are like, you know, longtime outdoors people, but people really help each other out with just adjusting to how to live outside for a week. Let's see, what else can I tell you about it? We get a ton of work done. I always tell volunteer crews that our goals are always to be safe, to have fun, and get to achieve the project goals, and in that order. So the safety comes first. If you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. And trust me, the project will get done. This year we had a great success because the Forest Service sledded in the building materials. We had, I guess those were what, 6 by 10 lumber or some kind of huge planks that we were working with, and they were able to sled that in during the snowy season so that we didn't have to do that, you know, at the time of the project. That was all staged and ready to go, and we packed in, you know, the rebar and the pounding tools and the cutting tools and so on. So that worked out great. It helps a great deal if the host organization has a stash of not only the tools and safety equipment, but things for camp, like stoves and fuel, cooking implements, tarps, anything that the group would use. I have, you know, my own camping supplies, but it really helps if you have some of your own supplies, or if you can find that among your own volunteer base. That's really, really helpful. So there might be a little bit of investment needed there. The other challenge that we had in Alaska was transportation. I think everybody's aware of the lack of rental cars and the enormous expense of rental cars this last summer. That may or may not just be a blip, but it just came down to there just wasn't another way to do it. AHS was able to rent a van from an outfitter who had the right kind of van to comfortably transport everybody and, you know, have a gear truck for all the stuff that we were hauling out there. So that was really essential. Ellie noted that usually on most trips in the lower 48, a lot of people will drive to the site, but that's not going to be the case in Alaska. So thinking now about transportation is a key piece to it. That one kind of had us sweating for a little while, but it did work out. I think the volunteer vacations are also a great way to develop your local volunteer base. If you have somebody locally who can serve either as the host on behalf of AHS, or who can come out for a day or a couple days, that can be a great way for them to kind of to integrate the local volunteer base with the people who are coming from all over the country. So I can go on and on about volunteer vacations. I'm a huge fan of them. And I'd love to serve as a local resource for anybody in Alaska who is thinking about hosting one.
Thanks, Shirley. Let's turn it over to Sarah and of course her coworker Claire Shipton, who was the one who applied as well, to hear some more from the Forest Service and see some cool pictures of the work.
I feel like I failed to
is
say
coming.
that the Forest Service gave us fantastic support as well. I mean, Claire was right there at every turn for every question or concern I had. Sarah was there. We had an intern as well. So I felt completely supported by the Forest Service. I also did a volunteer vacation at the Kenai Wildlife Refuge, and again had a great experience with their people and their gear and their organizational capacity. So we have a lot of success here in Alaska.
Take it away, Sarah.
Sweet. Yeah, so just a little more background on why I was involved in this particular project. I have worked seasonally with the Forest Service on the Seward Ranger District for the last 5 seasons. And in my capacity as a ranger, I work just part of our general trails program. So in addition to maintaining all of our backcountry campsites and trail signs and engaging in public contacts, we do a lot of the annual trail maintenance that gets done on the trails. So digging drainage and minor brushing and sort of repairing small things that we can do on the go as we see them. So I've done quite a bit of trail work in that capacity and had built other puncheons similar to the ones that we did for this project. And Claire was imminently leaving on her maternity leave, so was more than happy to step in to help out. But yeah, she is our volunteer coordinator and did a lot of the logistical work relating to the success of this program. And I and Kate, our Mobilize Green intern, were actually in the field leading the project. And so I will pull up my slides here. So we were working out at Gull Rock, which is in Hope. Can everyone see the PowerPoint here?
Yep, looks great.
Great, so this was our group. We were working on the Gull Rock Trail, which, like I said, is out in Hope, Alaska. Our group stayed at the Porcupine Campground, which is a Forest Service campground out there in Hope for anyone who hasn't been. And Hope was actually a really excellent setting for a project of this variety because we had sort of a variety of lodging resources should we need them. Everyone was more than happy to camp out at the campground, but the community of Hope was a short walk away. So some of the volunteers did take advantage of being able to take a shower. We went out to eat as a group on our last evening together. So having that community nearby actually was a huge asset. And the other great thing is that there's other Forest Service hiking trails out of Hope. So on their down day, this group split into a few different groups, and a few of them hiked up the Hope Point Trail, and the others drove up Palmer Creek Road to explore that area. So it was really great that they had sort of a diversity of experiences to choose from while we were there working on the project. We also got extremely lucky with the weather. It was sunny and warm, which makes trail work just all that much more fun. And so, yeah, we had a group of 8, including myself and our Mobilize Green intern, Kate and Shirley. And we had really a big range in terms of age and background and trail experience. So it made for a really fun week because the members who had done several volunteer vacations in the past really had some expertise as it related to doing trail work, and we're more than happy to share and teach skills to the people who were newer. And we did have some people who were totally brand new to the work as well, but we're super hard workers. So I'm just gonna send you guys through a short series of before and after photos. So we spent the week replacing puncheons, which are small footbridges on the Gull Rock Trail. They were about a mile from the campground, so we did get a nice little warm-up walk every morning and route to the job site. This is a photo of Alicia, one of our volunteers, working on a sill. Hard at work, looking good. So this was the first one that we replaced, and like Shirley said, Claire applied for this volunteer vacation in the fall of the previous season. And then the materials for the project were snow machined out in the wintertime. Yeah, they were huge. They were like 4 by 10 by 14s or something were the pieces of lumber that we use. So it was pretty key that those got out there in advance. But yeah, as you can see, the previous puncheon was in pretty rough shape, and the new one, the original was all native decking, but we replaced them with dimensional stuff, so they should last even longer than the originals did. So that's the first one. The second one here, those two are sort of right close to each other on the trail, and then up a little bit further. We had sort of a double here, so we only replaced the first one in the photo. The other one structurally is still doing just fine and just needs a few new pieces of decking. And then this was the last one. And so we did a full rip and tear and replace on these. So the volunteers, just with my leadership and direction and guidance when necessary, did all of the demolition. They did all of the digging to install new sills, so pieces of lumber that these long stringers are sitting on. They're not just propped on the ground, they're actually rebarred into another piece of dimensional lumber that are underneath them. So they're really solid, they're really strong, they should hold up well to our Alaskan, freeze thaw biannual cycle that we go through. And yeah, these originals were spiked in with huge nails to just rounds, so a chunk of a tree that had been buried in the ground. So they were pretty heavy and pretty unwieldy to deal with, but the volunteers really were excited to do this style of work, and pretty naturally paired up and took on various parts of the project. And we did have a little engineer experience in the group, so as soon as that started to emerge, I had full faith in their ability to build these beautiful level little footbridges. And you can sort of see in some of these photos, in addition to building the new puncheon, we did dig out the drainages so that the water would flow more freely. So that was a time-consuming element of the project, but we were actually successful in getting these puncheons done in about 3 days. So with our last day on the project, we chose to carry on down the trail a little further. And we gave people the opportunity to actually hike all the way to the end of the trail to see Gull Rock, because it has such a killer view out there at the end. And the people who were interested could sort of carry on and do some more trail work along the way. So we chose to sort of address these really rooty sections of the trail that are about 4 miles out. There was a big beetle kill event that came through in the early 2000s on Gull Rock, and many of the really large spruce trees were hit and have since fallen or broken. And so there's many sections of the trail where the roots from those stumps are in the trail in this spider web fashion, but the tree itself is dead. So we took it upon ourselves to do some root rip and tear and get the trail tread looking in a little bit better shape and a little bit more pleasant for walking and biking on. And yeah, like Shirley said, it was a super successful project. It took some coordination and some logistical work up front, but I think it was worth the effort that it required on everyone's part. And just on a personal level, it was one of the highlights of my season, I would say. And I think our mobilized green intern Kate would say the same. So yeah, just from a staff perspective, it was a great way to spend a week. I always love getting to spend time in Hope, and yeah, would certainly be more than happy to do another project of this variety in the future.
Great. Well, thanks, Sarah.
Yeah.
Everybody, please use the chat function to let me know if you have any questions, but I would appreciate hearing from Sarah or maybe from Claire Shipton with the Forest Service. What inspired you to apply for the volunteer vacation? And then do you have plans for using another volunteer vacation crew in the future?
It actually, oh.
No, we can hear you. Sorry, Claire. Sorry, Claire, you're good.
Oh, okay. It came across my email, the application and the deadline, and this project was actually set up. They had snow machined the lumber out the year before. So that was kind of a no-brainer. It seemed like a great project to apply for. I know, I think everyone loves building structures because it's just a project you can see from the beginning to the end, and then next time you come back, it'll still be there looking great. And I actually hadn't heard of it before, but figured we'd apply and see what happened. And I had my serious doubts with COVID that anything would even come of this. And then in the spring found out that it was going to go through. So that's when the real planning started. I kind of just applied to see what would happen. And the application was fairly simple. I think I added a lot of details about the area and the project, and I'd be interested to see, to speak with Ellie and see like how much details needed, if other people put, you know, a whole lot of details in. I was really trying to convince you guys that this was one to pick. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised in the spring, and that's when the planning started. And I worked with Ellie just a little bit, you know, here and there. And then once we found out that Shirley was going to be the crew leader, I think that was really crucial to have Shirley be a part of it. And the fact that she was actually here in Alaska and knew the area and had some resources available to her. I think it would be a little more difficult if everyone was just flying in on a plane and showing up at the airport. I'd say the thing that the Forest Service wasn't able to provide was transportation from the airport. And I know that would have made everyone's life a lot easier in the planning aspect. But with COVID and our lack of like personnel available to be going to Anchorage, yeah, we couldn't make that happen. So I'm very grateful that Ellie and Shirley were able to figure out how to make that happen. So I lost my train of thought.
Did you apply for next season, or do you know if anybody in the Forest Service did?
We did apply for next season, which was an earlier deadline. This previous year, it was the beginning of December, so it kind of caught me off guard. I should have been thinking about it, but I wasn't ready. And but I did get an application in for another project in the Hope area because I thought that, like Sarah said, it seemed like a really great spot to work out of. And I'd like to come up with some other ideas in the future that take that planning in the winter to get supplies in ready for the project. But yeah, I'm hopeful for next year, and I hope we can keep continuing to do this because I got really good feedback from Sarah and Kate. They seemed to have a great time and said that everyone involved had a great time. So I was impressed. And I spoke with my boss about kind of, we sort of scrounged to get cook gear and supplies and everything ready. So we're going to try and step it up and have like dedicated equipment that we can use each year.
Right.
And make this a thing, because it seemed great on everyone's front, I think.
Great, thanks, Claire. We've got about 5 minutes before we're going to shift gears and hear about another innovative project down in Sitka. But Ellie and Shirley, from your view of all the projects, you know, the sometimes 50 happening each summer or the 20 that you've been on, Shirley, is this one pretty standard? Is it have any special qualities? Or Ellie, why don't you go first? But is this kind of what the volunteer vacations look like in the other 49 states?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can kind of follow up on Claire and kind of talk a little bit more about like what AHS is looking for in the application. Because obviously you did a great job with the first application and it was selected, and a lot of things we consider a lot when selecting our different volunteer vacations. So one of them is the ability of the host to provide kind of what we ask the host to provide, including the appropriate housing for our volunteers, which is a range. It can be anything from camping, from backcountry camping to car camping to potentially staff lodging or housing. So that varies, but that's a very crucial aspect of whether or not that kind of like aligns with what we kind of the standards that we like to provide for our volunteers. And as Shirley mentioned, they are vacations. So we definitely look for locations that have some appeal or draw to the volunteers outside of the project. So like Sarah talked about, the little city of Hope was an awesome asset to this project, so that the volunteers could get to explore a little bit. I think Shirley did an excellent job kind of sharing the feel and even the taste of Alaska with their cooking throughout the week. And providing the cooking and camping gear is a huge asset. So if your organization or as any land manager, if you're able to provide the full range of cooking and camp gear, that definitely makes the project much more viable, and we're much more likely to select projects that have those resources. But that's not, I don't want anyone to be discouraged if you don't have that, because we will work with each host to kind of supplement the gear. Usually the crew leader is able to supplement gear, and AHS does have a budget to help that where needed. However, the more that the host can provide, the better that we're able to kind of continue and see that project through. Another thing that we look for is also different hosts kind of throughout the United States will select the timing of the trip to have the best weather, or maybe there's a local festival or fall foliage or something else to kind of like help attract the volunteers to that certain location. Because with 50 locations, we do have competing interests for our volunteers. But the more kind of like the destination or the more of the vacation that we can make it, the better. And I also look at the project's strenuous level. So when a host is applying, they let us know how strenuous the project is. And that can vary from pretty easy to moderate to strenuous and even very strenuous, depending on the project and the scope of the work. And that does kind of influence, because we want to offer a range of projects for more beginning volunteers, and also projects that kind of cater to those who have more experience and maybe want to get more involved in their project with their participation over the years. So kind of all of those factors come into when we're selecting a volunteer vacation. But I have to say, like many of us have mentioned, Alaska is a huge destination for a lot of people. So we find generally there is a lot of interest in our Alaska trips, and people do tend to make it a bigger trip overall, staying early, coming, doing some extra side trips along the on either end of the vacation. So we typically have a lot of interest in Alaska trips. So I'm always really excited to work with hosts and new hosts in new areas up in Alaska.
Great, thanks. And Shirley, maybe why don't you finish up this section with just some concluding thoughts on how this project, maybe like the strenuousness of it or anything compared with the other ones that you've led over the years.
I would say it was accurately rated for, was it rated difficult or very difficult or strenuous? I don't know what it was, but it was pretty tough. It was accurately described. My only thing to put in the lessons learned file is I'd asked the Forest Service, they very wisely chose their tools for multi-use tools like Pulaskis and Pickmatics. Personally, I will get more done with a McLeod, which is a much lighter weight tool, not as versatile, but I can use it all day. With something like a Pulaski, y'all are gods. I am mortal. I don't live outside. I don't work outside all summer, and I'm in good shape, but come on. So having a range of tools for different different, just that range kind of goes in the
Shirley, I think you got stuck again with that slow internet. I apologize. Wish I could snap my fingers and speed the internet back up. I want to thank all four of, including Claire, jumping in at the last minute. Thank you for your presentations. The American Hiking Society has a great website, videos, other materials. We're of course going to post Ellie and Sarah's presentations on our website, but don't wait for that. If you're interested in an American Hiking Society volunteer application or more information, please visit their website, and Ellie can help connect you with the resources or with her coworkers who can. So thanks again to you for, as the second half of our innovative initiatives on trails panels, we're going to head down to Sitka to hear from Ben Huey about the work that's been going on in Sitka for quite some time. So Ben, why don't you go ahead? I know Ben sent me an updated slide deck, so why don't you go ahead and share your screen while I introduce you. Ben launched his career in natural resources at Sitka Trailworks as a crew member in 2006. He spent college summers working for the local U.S. Forest Service before joining the Mountains to Sound Greenway Trust to build trail in the Cascades. He traded a Pulaski for the pen at the Greenway Trust, supporting regional land management planning and public lands advocacy at the local, state, and federal level for 6 years. A postmaster's degree environmental policy fellowship took Ben to the other Washington in 2019, where he served as legislative staff for Senator Cory Booker. In 2020, he returned home to Sitka and directed the Sitka Conservation Society's CARES Act-funded transitional employment program, leading out of work Sitkans on recreation and restoration projects with lasting community benefits. He then joined Sitka Trailworks at the end of 2020. And so we're happy to have him here today, talking not only about Sitka Trailworks, but the Sitka Trail Plan and really the base that it has given Sitka to build trails for what Ben will tell us will be quite a long time. So thanks again, Ben, and take it away.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thanks for the intro, Steve. You know, it's an exciting group of people when I can give a 10-minute presentation on one plan and people will be riveted, I'm sure. So we're going to dive in here and talk about this document that has laid the foundation for a lot of the success in trail development in our little island community here in Tlingit-Ani. I'm going to first start by taking you back to the 90s. In 1993, the Sitka pulp mill closed, and at its peak, it employed like 450 people. And to the folks in town, its closure felt like it happened overnight. Stores downtown shuttered, and people were kind of panicked. Fortunately, Uncle Ted was pretty deft with the earmarks back in those days, and the city of Sitka received millions in economic relief. The city itself didn't really know what to do with that, and so they put out an open call for proposals and had just citizens say what they wanted to do with the funding. And so a few folks in town, Lisa Bush, Charles Horan, an appraiser, and a state of Alaska employee who worked at the job center, got together and came up with the idea of a workforce development program that put people to work on trails. So they put the idea in and were funded, and were able to design a program that lasted for over 5 years, employing displaced mill workers to build and maintain trails around town, giving them a transition period, some training, helping them move into other careers and stay in town and keep the economy afloat. So years into this, this small group of people who started to call themselves Sitka Trailworks got pretty excited, and they started sketching out new ideas and Charles, the appraiser, was really gung-ho. He just wanted to hack through the brush, walk up mountains, and make trails that way. But fortunately, the very wise landscape architect on the Tongas National Forest, Barth Hamburg, had him slow down a little bit and said, hey, you guys, you can't just hack into the woods. We got to think through this a little bit more. We need to have sustainable trail design, and we need to have a plan. So they got together, huddled together, and came up with their goals. They wanted, everybody agreed that there was a variety of opportunities that should be allowed for people in town, from family-friendly nature walks to those big epic mountain climbs. And they wanted to work across all the different land ownerships from city and state and federal lands, and coordinate between all the different agencies. And they wanted to, step by step, how are we going to get this done? Who's going to do what? And through the process of building a plan, they wanted to engage the community. So in late 1999, as you all know, like, who are you going to call when you need to plan? RTCA. So National Park Service Rivers Trails Conservation Assistance Program jumped in the summer of 99, and they created a survey, and helped in that initial framing, the vision and goals. One of my favorite parts of this document is this: in April of the year 2000, they report that survey response is excellent. I'm sure that's what everyone wants to hear about their surveys that you've all submitted to get response. But these guys were really working hard, and they got feedback from the community. They drafted a plan. And they got, with that draft plan even, they got signers from the Forest Service, the city, the state, and then they went back. They went back to the public, and they printed 100 copies of this like 40-page document. They mailed it out to people. They had written paper surveys with this draft plan. And it was a year later, they created another draft, did another round of review, created a memorandum of understanding, and with the final plan, sat down with the partners. Here we have the mayor, Fred Reeder, on the left, Charles Oran, the appraiser, Carol Goulart, the district ranger, forest supervisor, state parks, and the national park. We had the folks in the room who were going to be able to get it done signed this document. And this MOU kind of became the foundation for working together over the next couple decades. These agencies at the highest level said, we believe in this vision. We know the community supports it, and we'll sign up to get some of this work done. And that's when they were able to publish this plan. Right there on the front of the plan, you can see all the different agencies are listed with their names. They were full participants and agreed to quarterly trail partner plan meetings, and would get together and talk about ongoing project work. So that responsibility piece is baked into the plan. The trail projects are divided by who is the lead agency. And some of that was Sitka Trailworks, now having been founded as a nonprofit and hired their first executive director right before the publishing of the plan. So they, all the different agencies in town, the city, the state, the tribe, all put down as a couple trails that they wanted to take point on and lead the progress. So in the plan development, they also broke out by the types of trails that people were interested in. They had these like near town walking facilities, everything from separated paved pathways to easy hiking trails. And then they had more cultural interest pieces, right? We have a World War II facility just out of town here that's a great attraction, but had really grown over and had basically no management. People also said they really wanted coastal trails. And so there were a couple ideas thrown out in the plan for longer coastal trails. And then improvements, reconstruction to certain trails, biking, hiking, ATV trails were all included. And so they took these sketches and these ideas, and in the final plan, they have really simple maps that show the land ownership sketched out. And they have these visions shown visually in so this is one half of a page. It's a folding document. I meant to have a copy on hand, but don't. And the other side of the page is what is this project? Who wanted it? Why? Some notes on planning and design. Who's going to take point? And what might it cost? Now, obviously, in 2003. $2 million for 6 miles of multimodal trail came in a little under in today's dollars, but ultimately the framework that this plan provided, which was a map and some description, this is how we're going to do it, this is who's going to do it, was so powerful that it became the guiding document for our organization. Sitka Trailworks basically had this as their strategic plan, and it was a vision that the entire community could get behind. So when you went to DC, what were they holding when they talked to Lisa and Ted? That's right. It's the Sitka Trail Plan right there in Deborah's hands, the executive director, on the steps of the Capitol. So this plan has helped us build the cross trails, which is kind of the backbone of our entire trail system, connects from downtown. And we're to this day completing the final extension out to the end of the road. And it's a walking, biking, skiing facility that is much beloved by the community, along with a bunch of other trails that have been completed or reconstructed, developed, or maintained. There's been a lot of ribbon cuttings, a lot of excavator work. There's Barth Hamburg down in the lower right-hand corner with Troy Bain, our crew foreman, the main excavator. So if you want to take a look, go to sitkatrailworks.org and go to the About Us section. You can scroll down. I've also included the link here. But I just started as executive director, and this plan is finally, I think, reaching the end of its life. It's been almost 2 decades, and so now our organization is looking to what next and how to update this and reinvigorate the plan, partnerships in a different era. So we appreciate all your feedback or questions as I'm learning about this process too. And with that, I'll hand it over to Haley.
Before we introduce Haley and have her talk about the Tongass Sustainable Trail Strategy, Ben, what it seems like, gosh, so many projects and so many decades, but do you think you'll do a whole new plan, or will this one be revamped? Or it's great that you've got the partners, so it seems like a lot of the work has been done, but maybe you get to dream big again. What's the process that you think for that?
Yeah. I think it'll depend somewhat on what we hear from folks in Sitka. There are different opinions on how much more trails we need. Obviously, folks like me who can, roll out a map and start drawing are excited about expanding the trail system. But subsistence hunting is a really high value in this community. And there's an argument to be made that trails can access hunting, and then in some cases use can be in conflict with hunting. So we're considering that. We're also trying to figure out what the highest value is for the community right now, as far as backcountry versus front country, walking, biking, active transportation. So we're really seeing this as a blank slate. I do think we can use the Sitka Trail Plan as a really strong foundation, use a lot of the learnings that they created to, it'll be somewhere between an update and a whole new plan. I don't think we're not going to start from scratch because we have this great foundation, but it's going to be a little more than just a couple new ideas on the same template.
And my final question before we pop it over to Haley, is there a lot about economics in there? I assume that, gosh, all the investments made have contributed to the local economy, not just the health and the community
Yeah.
resources, but have you been able to measure that? Are there metrics for the economic impacts?
Yeah, good question. Here's a real wonky slide that won't be digestible in any short period of time. So I'll just describe the generalness of it. Past executive director calculated how much money they brought in just in grants from state and feds and foundations compared to how much money the city invested, and found it was over a 25-to-1 ratio. I think in this current subtotal, it was like a 36-to-1 ratio of just external money for trail development in Sitka. That's not talking about the intangibles of community health or the more tangibles of visitation because of our trail system. But yeah, obviously there are huge economic benefits. This plan doesn't go too much in depth onto that topic. I think that there's a mention in the why, the beginning section, but there's not, it's not preeminent. Community health and well-being and like just the needs and desires of the community was forefront in this plan.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thanks very much. If you want to stop sharing your screen, and we'll have Haley get her presentation up while I introduce her. So yeah, next to kind of finish up this innovative projects on trails is my coworker, Haley Johnston. Haley is the program manager for the Tongas National Forest Sustainable Trail Strategy. She has extensive experience in both outdoor recreation and nonprofit work. She passionately believes recreation is critical to the quality of life in Alaska, the mental health of our communities, and the resilience of the Alaskan economy. She immensely enjoys the collaborative process of her work on the sustainable trail strategy, which she's been working on for about a year, bringing together residents, trail users, commercial operators, nonprofits, Alaska Native tribal entities, and Forest Service staff to ascertain how the trails of the Tongas can become truly sustainable. So thanks for presenting today. Haley, take it away.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, and thanks to everyone who's here listening today and participating. As Steve mentioned, I am Haley Johnston. I'm sorry to be joining you today from somewhere where it's 70 degrees, but typically I live in Anchorage and Girdwood, but have had the pleasure of working down in the Tongas for the past year, which has been just really, really fun. I'm working on this Tongas National Forest Sustainable Trail Strategy. Our work at Alaska Trails is through a challenge cost share agreement with the Forest Service. So if you aren't privy to what those agreements look like, typically the project is of mutual benefit to both the Forest Service and the party that is in that agreement, and they both contribute financially, logistically, to the success of the project. So Alaska Trails has contributed some staff time towards the project, and the Forest Service has contributed their staff time and also financially towards the creation of this strategy. This was all started because the National Forest Service overall kind of embarked on this sustainability 10-year challenge that has 3 phases. And the first phase is very much a listening phase and trying to figure out what is community supported and what types of trail systems are going to be sustainable across the different forests and across the ranger districts within those forests. So we are in that first phase right now, and Alaska Trails was contracted to, or was partnered with, to basically do what is the listening phase of this for the Tongas. So we, I'm sure I can, oh, there we go. Sustainability is kind of a funny word. It has a lot of meanings to a lot of people in a lot of different capacities, but the way that it's defined for this strategy, it's the junctions where trails are socially relevant, supported, economically viable, and ecologically resilient. So they're kind of looking at this on 3 fronts, not just sustainable in terms of the environment, not just sustainable in terms of finances. And I think the biggest thing is that for trails to be sustainable, they need the community support to do so. So to achieve this, we're working with the public, communities, businesses, tribes, local governments, state and federal agencies to plan for how these trail systems will look in the future. And part of that means that we're looking at trails to build, trails that need maintenance, and trails that could potentially be decommissioned because they're no longer supported. And along the way, we're also recommending some approaches and programs that could help achieve the goals that communities are identifying. So this year we've gotten to work in 4 ranger districts / communities. It's very community focused. So we've picked basically a community per ranger district. That is our focus. Prince of Wales is a little bit unique, but so within Hoona Ranger District, we're working with the community of Hoona. Within Sitka Ranger District, the community of Sitka. Within the Petersburg Ranger District this year, we worked in the community of Cake. And then on Prince of Wales Island, there are just various communities. There's that that we're working in and have had significant input from some of them, and we'll be seeking more next year as well as we move into phase 2, when we'll be working in Angoon, Ketchikan, Wrangell, Yakutat, and a couple more communities on Prince of Wales. So it's forest wide. And anyone who's familiar with the Tongas knows that the Tongas is a huge forest. I just had the pleasure of driving through some national forests down here in the lower 48, and it's hilarious how fast you can drive across one of these forests. It's just like you blink and you're through Bridger National Forest, you know? So it's we have a unique animal in the Tongas to wrangle and figure out how to build a sustainable trail system across the forest and how it looks different in different locations across the forest. So our process on this project was we kind of did some initial forest wide reconnaissance. We got an inventory of all the trails in the forest and kind of their current status. The Tongas has an abundance of trails. Some of them are short, some of them haven't seen maintenance in a long time. So it's been really interesting to see the diversity across the forest. We identified communities to work with in this year at the beginning of 2021. We had a lot of conversations with folks in those communities, much of it virtual due to COVID, but we were actually able to travel to communities eventually this summer. So we visited all 4 of our communities. This fall, we've kind of developed, reviewed, and refined a draft report that we're gonna now be sharing with the Forest Service for review, partners and stakeholders as well. And it's very much a draft. Like these are our findings from a year of conversations, a year of ground truthing trails, and a year of research. And we're really excited to hear what the community thinks about this draft that we've developed. And we're very open to changes and amendments as more community feedback comes in. So we'll kind of repeat this process next year with new communities while we're also refining the first draft that we came up with. One of the best, or hopefully what I think will be the most impactful outcome of this process is that we have identified a lot of forest-wide issues or opportunities that I think across the forest work could be done synergistically to affect broad change and improve the trail system across the forest. In addition to that, we found some very unique issues and opportunities ranger district to ranger district, like the level of trail infrastructure between Cake on Kupreanof Island and Juneau is amazingly different. The level of capacity between a community that has, say Craig on Prince of Wales, largest community, about 1,000 people, the level of capacity they have for trail work as compared to Sitka, which has had a long time nonprofit and a community that's very invested in their trails and just a larger population, is really different. So not only are the existing trails assets across the ranger districts really diverse, but the communities are diverse, the resources they have available to them are diverse. And so figuring out a way to build a sustainable trail system for each of these very, very different communities has been really fun, and figuring out just the ways in which they're similar and the ways in which they're different. Some other key outcomes that we've seen and I think have been pretty interesting is that operating as this kind of third-party consultant partner with the Forest Service, I think has allowed us to get some really honest feedback from partners and stakeholders regarding this process, general policy, and the outcomes they hope to see from this process. We try to be really clear, like we can't change official Forest Service policy necessarily through this process. That's not our purview, but people have been really honest with us, because I think we've come in saying, we don't have a dog in this fight. We're not the Forest Service. We're not the community. We just want to make this work for everyone, and we're here to get information to do that. So we're a little bit like Switzerland in this process, and I think that's been helpful to the overall process. I think that our connections and like industry knowledge, planning expertise, and the fact that because we are statewide, we can call up someone who worked in state parks up in Fairbanks and get their experience on one particular trail issue and ask them how they worked around that, and then apply that to the Tongas has also been really helpful. So kind of having this statewide reach where we can pull in resources and ideas from across the state and then apply them in this region has been great. Again, the regional scale, this is kind of what I mentioned before, has allowed us to see those like pervasive issues that are affecting the whole forest. And then we can also drill down and see, like what's specific to the community of Hoonah, what's specific to the city of Sitka. Yeah, and then because of our statewide reach, we can work towards these solutions on the local level, like asking communities, if they are capable of fielding a volunteer trail crew, but we can also work with state and federal partners. We've got great relationships with, federal offices and the state DNR offices as well. So that's been helpful. We're also concurrently working on, we've got an Alaska Trails Initiative. We're working on the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. And so being able to kind of merge those streams and combine some of that work, I think has led to a little bit less redundancy when we're asking people for their input on projects, right? Because we're doing the Tonga Sustainable Trail Strategy. We're also helping out with this SCORP project. And so if we can ask people once about trail projects and incorporate them into both, I think that's a real, that's a benefit and an efficiency that wouldn't be possible if it was just being done on the Forest Service level. So yeah, it's been a really fun project to work on. I always say the best part of my job is I'm getting paid to go have nice conversations with people about trails, which just sounds like the best day. And I'm excited to see this project come to a conclusion next year in 2022, and then potentially continue this type of work across the state for folks who are looking to see how they can really make their trail systems sustainable. So thanks for letting us chat about the Tongas for a minute here, Steve. If you have any questions, I'm happy to field them.
Yeah, anybody can unmute or use the chat. I know that we're going to be hearing later today, Haley, about the Great American Outdoors Act, and I know that funding is sometimes a choke point or a hurdle for projects. So once the Sustainable Trail Strategy is set in place, how will projects be funded? Is that part of what you're looking at, and what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's a huge part of what we're looking at. So funding will come from existing sources that are enduring in the Tongass. So just their regular annual funding. Funding will come from one-off federal projects like GAOA, Great American Outdoors Act. And then the other part of the sustainability strategy is that in some ways funding and or capacity is going to have to come from outside of just the Forest Service. So they're looking for community partners who, perhaps the Forest Service is able to provide the planning and design work, and then an adjacent Alaska Native Corporation who would like to have a trail that begins on their land and extends into Forest Service land could provide some of the funding or pay for the trail crew. So it's looking at an all potential models scenario for funding, and that's certainly a part, as the Forest Service moves forward, of figuring out what's sustainable for them is how do we pay not just to build new trails, which are few and far between, but mostly how do we pay to maintain our existing trail system. So looking for community partnerships has been a real goal of this project. Great.
Well, thanks for zooming in. It's all risen up to 8 degrees here in Anchorage now, but I'm going to go ahead and close out this session to keep us on time. I want to thank all of our presenters, Ellie, Shirley, Sarah, Claire Shipton for joining in, Ben Huey and Haley Johnston. As I hope you all know, we've got some really great presentations coming up. So you got a 15-minute break, but right at 10:30, we'll be talking about the Alaska Long Trail, and we've got some exciting updates about that exciting project. So we'll hope you will be back at 10:30, our lunchtime keynote from the White Mountains, then leading into funding in the early afternoon, and a project update from around the state later. So please do join us for the rest of the sessions, and we'll see you at 10:30. Thanks again, everybody. Talk to you soon.
See ya. Thanks, Steve.